Have you ever spoken just a few words that changed everything? Today, I'm going to tell you the unforgettable true story of Sofia Romano, a young waitress whose simple act of kindness, speaking Italian to help an elderly customer, caught the attention of the most feared Mafia boss in the city, Mateo de Luca, and pulled her into a world of danger, passion, and a love that would change her life forever. Sofia balanced a heavy tray of dinner plates on her forearm as she weaved through the crowded Italian restaurant. The ambient din of clinking glasses and lively conversation filled the air, but her focus was on delivering the steaming bowls of pasta to table 6 without incident. It was a bustling Friday night in the heart of the city, and Trattoria da Rossi was alive with warmth and light. Sofia's petite frame moved gracefully, dark hair pinned back, a wisp of a curl escaping to brush her cheek. She flashed a polite smile at patrons as she passed, even as her feet ached from the long shift. Near the back, a corner booth was cloaked in shadows, occupied by men in tailored suits. They had an air of quiet authority. Other diners cast curious glances but kept their distance. Sofia had noticed them earlier, especially the man at the center, who radiated an aura of command. He was mid-30s, perhaps, with strong shoulders and a chiseled jaw softened by a thoughtful, distant expression. He had barely touched his meal, instead observing the room with piercing hazel eyes that missed nothing. Sofia didn't know him, but something about his presence made her heart beat faster, a mix of intrigue and cautious fear. Mafia, she had thought when she first saw the guarded way his companions flanked him. Men like these had a certain look, an alert stillness that spoke of concealed power and danger. As Sofia delivered the plates to table 6, an elderly woman at table 7 gently touched her hand. "Mi scusi, ragazza," the grandmotherly patron said, her voice wavering with limited English. "Può aiutarmi?" "My English not so good." Sofia's face lit up kindly. She had overheard the couple earlier and recognized the cadence of her grandparents' tongue. Italian. Sofia answered fluidly in Italian, her accent warm and authentic. "Certo, signora, of course." "Mi dica come posso aiutarla?" She crouched slightly to the woman's level, listening carefully to her request for a vegetarian alternative not listed on the menu. Sofia nodded, responding with reassuring words in Italian, and promised to arrange something special with the chef. The old woman's eyes crinkled with gratitude. In that moment of gentle kindness, Sofia felt a familiar ache. She missed her own nonna, who used to speak to her in Italian when she was a child. Helping this signora felt like second nature, a small act of care in a city that often moved too fast for its elders. Sofia excused herself politely and headed toward the kitchen to convey the special order. From the corner booth, Mateo de Luca had witnessed the entire exchange. At the sound of Sofia's Italian words drifting through the restaurant, his attention, which had been mildly detached, snapped into focus on her. The rich, melodious Italian rolling off the young waitress's tongue was unexpected here, outside the old neighborhood. He set down his untouched glass of red wine. For the first time that evening, Mateo's cold, strategic mind was struck by something personal. He watched Sofia as she leaned in compassionately to the old woman, noting the genuine warmth in her espresso brown eyes. There was something about her voice. Dio. It had been ages since he'd heard a civilian speak his mother tongue so naturally, without calculation or fear. It stirred a memory of his childhood in Sicily. His mother singing in the kitchen, flour on her hands, a gentle lullaby in Italian when he couldn't sleep. A memory he'd buried beneath years of running the family business in this foreign city. One of Mateo's men, Luca, noticed his boss's sudden interest. Luca followed Mateo's line of sight to the waitress. "Boss?" he asked quietly in Italian. "Tutto bene? Everything all right?" Mateo's gaze remained fixed on Sofia's retreating figure as she disappeared into the kitchen. He narrowed his eyes thoughtfully. She was clearly not part of his world, just an ordinary girl working a job, but the ease with which she spoke Italian set her apart in this crowd. It was a language of his inner life, rarely heard from strangers here. There was a spark of curiosity, and something more protective lit within him. He spoke in a low voice, quiet but firm. "Portala da me," Mateo instructed Luca under the murmur of the restaurant, the words rumbling like distant thunder. "Bring her to me." Luca blinked in surprise but quickly nodded, slipping out of the booth without question. Sofia emerged from the kitchen a moment later, balancing the modified dish carefully. She moved toward the elderly Italian couple's table to present the chef's special creation, a plate of roasted vegetables and pasta glistening with olive oil and garlic. "Ecco a lei, signora," Sophia said softly as she set it down, smiling at the woman's delighted exclamation and her husband's appreciative nod. The small success warmed Sophia. These moments made the long hours worthwhile. As she stepped back, Sophia nearly collided with a solid wall of a man who had appeared just behind her. Startled, she looked up to find Luca, though she didn't know his name, standing imposingly close. He wore a neatly pressed suit and had the build of someone who could break a door down with one shoulder. Sophia's pulse jumped. Patrons weren't usually so forward or silent. "Signorina," the man said with a polite incline of his head, voice low but courteous. "My boss would like a word with you." He didn't touch her, but the way he loomed made it clear this was not a mere request from a diner wanting extra breadsticks. Over his shoulder, Sophia glimpsed the corner booth. The man with the hazel eyes was watching her, his expression unreadable. Her throat went dry. His boss. She instinctively understood who he meant. The quiet man in the shadows who had commanded the room without a word. Sophia's heart kicked in her chest. Had she done something wrong? Spilled wine on him inadvertently? Why would someone like him want to speak with her? A nobody waitress. She quickly ran through her recent interactions. Nothing odd except... Perhaps he overheard her speaking Italian and took offense? Or was he some kind of VIP? Around them, the restaurant hum continued, oblivious to Sophia's sudden anxiety. She mustered a steady voice despite her nerves. I'm working. Perhaps after I finish with my tables." The large man gave a tight, apologetic smile that didn't reach his eyes. "He insists, miss. It will only take a minute." There was a polite firmness that told her refusal wasn't an option. Sophia's mind whirled. She glanced at the old woman's table. The signora gave her an encouraging wave, assuming perhaps that this was someone from management or a friend. Swallowing, Sophia nodded. "All right. Just a minute." Luca escorted her toward the booth. She felt the gaze of the other suited men at the table flick over her. A brief assessment that sent a chill of awareness up her spine. She smoothed her apron with a sweaty palm. As they reached the table, Mateo de Luca rose smoothly to his feet, an unexpected courtesy. Up close, he was even more striking. Tall and broad-shouldered, he wore a charcoal gray suit that spoke of quiet luxury, a faint shadow of a beard traced along his jaw. But it was his eyes that held her. Greenish hazel with flecks of amber, sharp and observant. They flickered over her face, and for an instant Sophia felt laid bare, as if he could read every thought racing through her mind. "Miss..." His deep voice rolled out, polite yet commanding. Sophia realized she was staring and dropped her gaze. She noticed his hands, strong, with a few faint scars across the knuckles, resting on the table. Definitely a man who'd seen violence up close. She cleared her throat. "Sophia," she offered quietly. "My name is Sophia Romano." She wasn't sure if he'd asked her name or if she should introduce herself, but the silence pressed on her until she filled it. "Sophia," he repeated, as if tasting the sound. Her name sounded different in his mouth, touched by a gentle Italian accent that hinted at years spent elsewhere. "Grazie for coming. I apologize if I pulled you away from your work." His tone was courteous, yet it carried the weight of someone used to being obeyed. Sophia tucked that stray wisp of hair behind her ear nervously. "Is there something I can help you with, sir?" she asked, carefully respectful. Her eyes darted to the others seated. They were pointedly not looking at her, as if giving an illusion of privacy. She recognized one face now, finally placing him. A local city councilman who occasionally appeared in the news. Her stomach clenched. If that man was keeping company with this stranger, whatever circle he belonged to was high indeed. Mateo didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached for his wine glass and gestured to the seat opposite him in the booth. "Please sit," he said. Sophia hesitated, glancing over her shoulder. Marissa, the head waitress, was busy at the register and hadn't noticed Sophia being waylaid. Yet. If she was caught fraternizing with a patron, especially one of these powerful men, she could get in trouble or at least in over her head. But Luca remained by her side, patiently waiting, and Mateo's request hung in the air like an inevitability. "Just 1 minute," he'd said. Perhaps it would be all right. Sophia gingerly slid onto the edge of the seat across from him, her back stiff and heart thumping. Luca stepped back a pace, standing guard a discreet distance away. Mateo watched her, an intensity in his eyes that made her shiver. "I couldn't help but overhear you earlier," he began, fingers lightly circling the rim of his wineglass. "You speak Italian. Beautifully." Sophia's cheeks warmed unexpectedly at the praise. "Oh, thank you." Her mind raced. He had called her over just because she spoke Italian? She managed a timid smile. "My grandmother is from Calabria," she explained. "I grew up speaking Italian at home." Her voice gained a bit of strength when talking about her family. "The couple at table 7 seemed to need help, so I just—" "You did well," Mateo interjected softly. "It was kind of you." He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice so it wouldn't carry beyond her. In this city, not many take the time to show such care, especially in 2 languages. There was almost a hint of admiration in his tone. Sophia was taken aback. The last thing she expected from this man was a commendation for compassion. Up close, she noted a faint scar at his temple, mostly hidden by his short black hair. A story there, no doubt. And while his manner was civil now, she could sense a coiled tension beneath it, like a panther at rest. I'm glad I could help them," Sophia replied, finding her voice. "Was that why you wanted to see me?" Mateo's lips curved just a fraction. "In part," he said. He glanced down at his glass, turning it once, then back at her. "It's rare to be reminded of home in the middle of dinner." He paused, then added almost pensively, "Hearing you speak, it reminded me of someone I knew." Sophia sensed a flicker of melancholy in his last words. For a heartbeat, his polished mask slipped, revealing a man who had memories that could still touch him. Then the steel was back in his gaze. He straightened almost imperceptibly. "How long have you worked here, Sophia?" She answered cautiously, "Almost a year." "It's a good job." She wondered if he was a friend of the owner checking up on staff. But no, that didn't fit. Perhaps he heard my accent and just wanted to talk? The thought was both reassuring and unnerving. She couldn't deny that despite her wariness, there was something magnetically compelling about him. Her pulse hadn't steadied since she sat down. Mateo nodded. "You handle yourself well. The customers are lucky to have you." The way he said it, it almost sounded personal. Sophia felt heat rise to her face again and looked down at her hands. "Thank you, signore," she murmured politely. She glanced at the others in the booth, still carefully ignoring them. One man was scrolling on his phone, another stirring his espresso, yet she had no doubt they missed nothing. Was this simply how power worked? A man like him sees something, or someone, he wants to explore, and the world around bends to accommodate. As if sensing her unease, Mateo spoke again, his voice a shade gentler. "Forgive me. I realize I haven't introduced myself properly." He gave a slight nod. "My name is Mateo de Luca." The name thudded in her ears with vague familiarity. Perhaps she'd heard it on the news, or in murmured warnings around the neighborhood. Sophia's hand went cold around the edge of the table. Yes, she had heard that name, only in whispers. The De Luca family, rumors of an Italian crime family that had moved into the city years ago, silent and deadly, if he was that De Luca. She fought to keep her face neutral as a prickle of fear coated her skin. Mateo studied her reaction keenly. "I see you recognize it," he said quietly, not quite a question. His tone held a resigned note, as if he was accustomed to people recoiling once they understood who he was. Sophia's instincts screamed at her to be careful. One didn't mingle with Mafia bosses and come out unscathed. "I've heard the name," she admitted carefully, her voice low. Her eyes flickered to the exit unconsciously. Was she in danger now? But no, he had been courteous, even kind in his own way. If he meant her harm, he wouldn't be sitting here making small talk. Mateo's jaw tightened just a bit, an infinitesimal reaction to the unspoken tension. "I assure you, I only wish to compliment you and talk, nothing more." He sounded almost apologetic, as if he regretted the shadow his reputation cast. Sophia swallowed, mustering a polite reply. "It's all right, Mr. De Luca. I appreciate the compliment." She started to slide out of the booth, feeling that lingering any longer might be playing with fire. "If there's nothing else, I really should get back to work." My manager will... He held up a hand, not touching her but signaling pause. Surprisingly, he reached into his inner jacket pocket and produced a sleek black business card. With 2 fingers, he offered it to her. Confused, Sophia accepted it. Embossed on the card was a simple name, Mateo de Luca, and a phone number, nothing more. If you ever find yourself in need of anything, qualunque cosa, anything at all, Mateo said, voice quiet but firm, call that number. Day or night, I owe you a kindness. She stared at the card. Owe me? The idea of a mafia boss feeling indebted to her was surreal. She shook her head lightly. I didn't do anything. You did, he interrupted, those eyes pinning her in place. You reminded me that even in this city, far from home, there are good people. People who speak the language of my mother who still show respect. He inclined his head. And you might have done more than you know. Small actions can have big consequences. Sophia wasn't entirely sure what he meant, but she sensed he was sincere in his own enigmatic way. Clutching the card, she offered a faint, courteous smile. That's very kind, Mr. De Luca. He nodded, then actually stood as she rose from the booth, an old-world gesture that surprised her. The other men at the table glanced up in mild astonishment. Apparently, it was not often their boss showed such gallantry. With a final look, one that held an intensity Sophia couldn't decipher, Mateo dismissed her. Buonanotte, Sophia. The words, good night, rolled off his tongue smoothly, intimately, as if he'd wished her sweet dreams. Sophia's chest fluttered. Buonanotte, she replied softly, then quickly remembered to add, good night, sir. She walked back toward the kitchen on unsteady legs, feeling the weight of Mateo's gaze lingering until she rounded the corner. The entire exchange had lasted only a few minutes, but Sophia felt as if she'd stepped briefly into another world, one with its own rules and dangers. She slipped the card into her apron pocket and drew a calming breath. The sense of tomato sauce and basil from the kitchen helped ground her. Focus, she told herself. She was just a waitress finishing her shift. Back to reality. Yet as she resumed her tasks, the adrenaline refused to dissipate. Against her better judgment, she found herself peeking at the corner booth from the kitchen doorway. Mateo had sat back down, now engaged in a low conversation with the councilman, his expression unreadable once more. One of his men leaned in to murmur something to him, and Mateo's eyes flicked up, to lock directly with Sophia's across the room. Her breath caught. Had he sensed her watching? Even from a distance, the connection jolted through her like a live wire. Mateo gave the barest hint of a nod, polite, acknowledging, then returned his attention to his companions, leaving Sophia with a pounding heart. She ducked back into the kitchen, berating herself. Get a grip. She shouldn't be fascinated by a man like that. He was trouble, no matter how courteously he spoke or how handsome he was. The sensible thing was to avoid any further interactions. People who got involved with men like Mateo de Luca often ended up hurt. Or worse. Sophia finished the rest of her shift in a distracted haze. By the time the last customers paid their bills and the chairs were flipped onto tables for mopping, she had convinced herself the strange encounter was over. Likely she'd never see Mateo again. Perhaps he was just feeling nostalgic tonight, and come tomorrow he'd forget the kind waitress who spoke Italian. As she hung up her apron and grabbed her coat, Sophia's fingers brushed the card still tucked in her pocket. She pulled it out, regarding the elegant script of his name. Her thumb traced the embossed number. It struck her that he hadn't explained why she might need it, just anything at all. The implication was both generous and daunting. With a slight shiver, Sophia tucked the card safely into her purse and headed out the back exit. The night air was crisp for early summer, carrying the distant honk of city traffic and a whiff of rain on the breeze. Almost midnight. Her apartment was only 6 blocks away, a walk she often enjoyed after a stuffy shift indoors. She could take the bus, but the night was calm, and the streets of this neighborhood were usually quiet by this hour. Sophia wrapped her light jacket around herself and started down the alley that led to the main boulevard. The streetlights cast long shadows between the dumpsters and stacked crates behind the restaurant. She passed the mouth of the alley where it opened to the sidewalk, giving a nod to the busboy, Andres, who was smoking a last cigarette by the curb. He waved and offered a buenas noches, and she returned the good night with a smile, As she continued, her thoughts strayed again to Mateo. His intense eyes. The way he'd stood when she left as if she were a lady and not just a server. She shook her head and smiled wryly at herself. It had been a long time since any man had made her heart flutter. Trust her luck that it would be one like him. Lost in her musings, Sophia almost didn't notice the black car parked a little way down the block, engine idling. But the low rumble and a faint glow from the headlights drew her attention. A sleek black sedan, expensive looking, was stationed at the curb near the restaurant's main entrance. Likely waiting for someone, maybe a late-night pickup from the bar next door. Suddenly self-conscious, Sophia squared her shoulders and kept walking, heels clicking softly on the pavement. She had an inexplicable sense that she was being watched again, though the street appeared empty, except for the distant silhouette of Andres finishing his smoke. Just as she was about to cross the intersection to her street, a voice called out softly from behind her, causing her to start. "Miss Romano." She turned quickly. Luca, the same broad-shouldered man from before, stepped out of the shadows by the idling car. How long had he been there? In his hand, he held something out towards her. Her heart jumped to her throat, adrenaline flaring anew. In the yellow cone of the streetlight, she recognized her own cell phone. "You left this on the table," Luca said, his deep voice surprisingly gentle. "At the booth." Sophia exhaled hard, the tension in her chest loosening a notch, as she realized he was simply returning her forgotten phone. She hadn't even noticed leaving it. Heat flushed her cheeks at her own scatterbrained lapse. "Grazie," she said quietly, taking the device from his hand. Their exchange was quick, but not quick enough to miss the way Luca's eyes subtly scanned the dark street around them, ever vigilant. She offered a polite smile, embarrassed. "Thank you. I'm sorry you had to come all this way." "It's no trouble," Luca replied, inclining his head. "Boss's orders. He didn't want you to worry when you noticed it missing." Sophia bit her lip. That Mateo would send someone after her just to return her phone. He really was thorough. And considerate, in his own way. The thought warmed her, even as it raised more questions. "Please thank him for me," she said softly, clutching her phone like a lifeline. "I appreciate it." Luca gave a slight smile, brief and professional. "I will. Have a safe night, miss." He hesitated as if weighing whether to say more, then added, "Do you need a ride home?" Sophia blinked, surprised by the offer. The black sedan idled just behind him, a silent sentinel. A part of her was tempted. Her feet were sore and a ride sounded heavenly. But climbing into a car with the Mafia, even for a courtesy drop-off, felt like stepping over an invisible line. "Oh, that's really not necessary," she replied quickly, tightening her grip on her purse. "I don't live far, I'll be fine. But thank you." Luca gave a single nod, not pressing the matter. "As you wish. Stia attenta, be careful." He turned and walked back to the sedan, giving one last look around before getting into the passenger side. Sophia caught a glimpse through the tinted window. She thought she saw a figure in the back seat, someone watching. But then the door closed, and the car pulled smoothly away from the curb. In a few seconds, it disappeared around the corner. Sophia released a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. She wasn't sure if she felt relieved or oddly bereft. Shaking her head, she chastised herself yet again. This was folly, daydreaming about gentlemen mobsters and stolen glances. Real life awaited, her small apartment, her responsibilities, a warm bath for her aching feet. She resumed her walk, phone safely in hand, and tried to calm the lingering adrenaline with practical thoughts. Tomorrow she'd visit Nonna and maybe bring cannoli from the bakery. Her grandmother loved sweet treats on Saturdays. The thought made her smile. By the time Sophia reached her quiet block lined with old brick buildings and sycamore trees, she had managed to push Mateo's mesmerizing eyes out of her mind. Yet, as she climbed the stairwell to her second-floor apartment, a tiny voice inside wondered if perhaps fate had shifted tonight. And whether she'd cross paths with the mysterious Mateo de Luca again after all. The next evening, Sophia found herself back at Trattoria de Rossi for another shift. The Saturday crowd was lively, and though she was tired from a morning spent visiting her grandmother and running errands, she wore her warm smile as always. As the hour grew late, the rush tapered off. Near closing time, only a few tables remained occupied, mostly couples lingering over dessert and coffee. Sophia was wiping down the bar counter when the front door chimed. She looked up, expecting a last-minute customer. To her surprise, in walked Mateo de Luca. Tonight, he was without the entourage, dressed more casually in a fitted black shirt and tailored slacks that still spoke of quiet wealth. Her heart did that little flutter again at the sight of him. He paused just inside, scanning the room out of habit. When his eyes met hers, a genuine if subtle smile touched his lips. He approached the bar where she stood rooted in place, a bundle of nerves and inexplicable delight warring within her. "Good evening, Sophia," Mateo said softly. She swallowed, finding her voice. "Good evening, Mr. De Luca." She glanced around. The other waitstaff had retreated to the kitchen to start cleanup, and the manager was in the back office balancing receipts. They were practically alone in the front of house. "You can call me Mateo," he offered, tilting his head. "I hope I'm not intruding. I know it's late." Sophia shook her head quickly. "No, not at all. We're still open." She tried to appear composed, though her pulse had kicked up. "Would you like a table, or—" "Actually, I was hoping for an espresso if it's not too much trouble," he said. He settled onto a bar stool, relaxing his posture. "Of course I can make you one," Sophia replied. Her hands were shaking slightly as she reached for the espresso machine's portafilter. She willed herself to calm down. "It's just coffee," she chided herself, "not an interrogation." As she worked, Mateo watched her with calm interest. "How is your grandmother?" he asked unexpectedly. Sophia nearly dropped the tamp. She looked up in surprise. "My grandmother? You mentioned she was from Calabria. I presumed she might still be with you?" Mateo's voice was courteous, but Sophia detected genuine curiosity in it. "She is," Sophia answered, touched that he remembered. "I visit her every Saturday morning. Took her groceries today, actually. She's doing all right for 82. Sophia smiled softly, thinking of Nona's stubborn insistence on cooking despite her arthritis. "She practically raised me, so we're very close." Mateo nodded, an almost wistful glint in his eyes. "È una cosa bella, la famiglia. That bond is important. It is a beautiful thing, family." Sophia nodded as she placed a tiny porcelain cup under the spout and started the espresso shot. "What about you? Do you have family here in the city?" It was a bold question, but perhaps a fair one since he'd inquired about hers. He was silent for a moment, the faint hum of the machine filling the air. "My mother is back in Sicily," he said at last. "I lost my father a long time ago. Here I have cousins, distant relatives, and those who work for me, whom I consider family." He gave a small shrug, "but no one like a nonna to fuss over me." There was a hint of melancholy wrapped in gentle humor. Sophia found herself smiling a little as she set the finished espresso in front of him on a saucer. "Then it's a good thing you at least have cousins and such around. And friends?" she added. Not sure if a man like him had real friends. Mateo thanked her for the coffee, lifting it to his lips. He took a sip, eyes closing briefly as if savoring something simple and good in an otherwise complicated life. "Perfetto," he pronounced softly, then met her gaze. "I do have some friends, yes. Though in my world that word can be complicated." Sophia sensed layers beneath that statement but didn't pry. Instead, she leaned lightly against the counter, finding this quiet moment surreal, yet pleasant. Who would have thought she'd be chatting casually with a Mafia boss over late-night espresso? A comfortable silence fell as he drank. Sophia absently straightened a stack of napkins to occupy her hands, stealing glances at Mateo's face. He looked more relaxed than last night, though his eyes still held that vigilant edge. Despite the danger surrounding him, in this moment he seemed almost human, just a tired man enjoying a bit of normalcy. Her curiosity bubbled up. "What brings you back here tonight? Surely not just the espresso," she ventured softly. Mateo set down his cup, the faintest smile touching the corner of his mouth. "Perhaps I wanted to see how you were doing after last night. It isn't every day I have the opportunity to meet someone like you." Sophia felt heat in her cheeks at the compliment and looked down. "Someone like me?" He tapped a finger on the counter thoughtfully. "A person with kindness and backbone. Bilingual to boot," he said lightly. Then more seriously, "This city can be unwelcoming to people who aren't hardened. I hope it's treating you well." Something in his genuine concern loosened Sophia's tongue. "I manage. It's not always easy, Working long hours, taking care of family, but I get by. I love this city, even when it's rough. It's home. Mateo's gaze softened. You remind me that sometimes we do things not for ourselves, but for those we love. It's admirable. Before Sophia could respond, the quiet was shattered by the abrupt ring of Mateo's phone. He frowned apologetically and pulled it out, glancing at the screen. As he answered in Italian, his posture stiffened, and his voice dropped into a terse murmur. She couldn't catch much, just a few words. Adesso, now. Problema, problem, and fai attenzione, be careful. Sophia pretended to busy herself wiping an already clean spot on the counter, giving him privacy, but her stomach fluttered with unease. His tone had put her on alert. Mateo hung up and slid off the bar stool, all traces of relaxation gone. His jaw was set in irritation or concern. Sophia, he said quietly. I'm sorry. I have to go. Disappointment flickered through her, but his urgency was obvious. Of course. I understand. He pulled out several large bills and set them under the demi-tasse cup. Far too much for a simple espresso. Sophia opened her mouth to protest the excess tip, but he stopped her with a raised hand. Please, indulge me. She nodded slowly, watching as he turned to leave, fishing car keys from his pocket. At that moment, 2 of his men hurriedly entered the restaurant, as if they'd been waiting outside. Mateo barked something in a low voice to them in Italian that Sophia only partially caught. Sta arrivando. He's coming. Preparatevi. Get ready. Her pulse quickened. Who's coming? Mateo glanced back at Sophia, his eyes meeting hers across the now empty dining area. In them she saw a warning and worry. Stay here, he commanded, firm but not shouting. Don't move. Sophia's heart lurched. What? Before she could finish, the front window exploded. A deafening crack of gunfire split the air. Screams from the kitchen rang out as glass shattered onto the empty tables. Sophia ducked instinctively behind the bar, terror flooding her veins. The restaurant plunged into chaos. Another shot rang, whizzing past where Mateo had stood a second before. He had dropped to a knee behind an upturned table, gun somehow already in hand. One of his men yanked the confused busboy to the ground, shouting for everyone to get down. It was an ambush. Through the spiderwebbed front glass, Sophia saw a dark figure outside with a pistol, taking aim again. Mateo fired back twice with lethal calm, and the figure ducked behind a parked car. The world narrowed to sounds and surges of adrenaline. Sophia pressed herself against the wooden bar, mind racing. Mateo had told her to stay down. But where was safe? Another bullet ripped through a chair above her, splinters raining. She muffled a cry. From her vantage, she could see Mateo gesture sharply to his men. Luca, she recognized him, was already moving along the wall, circling toward the side exit to flank the shooter. The other guard stayed near Mateo, covering him. Sophia's thoughts screamed, this isn't happening. 1 minute they were talking softly. The next, a war zone. Her breaths came shallow and fast. Was this because of him? Of course it was. He must have been targeted. She dared to peek out over the bar. Mateo caught her eye and mouthed, Stay. Even amid the danger, his gaze held concern for her. Suddenly, from outside, an engine revved. Tires squealed on pavement. The attacker must have decided to flee. Luca burst through the front door in pursuit, gun drawn, but the black shape of a motorcycle peeled away down the street, a lone rider escaping into the night. For a moment, silence reigned inside the riddled restaurant. The acrid smell of gunpowder hung in the air, mixed with the sharp tang of spilled coffee and dust. Sophia slowly uncurled from her crouch. Her ears rang. It had all happened in seconds, though it felt like hours. Mateo rose from behind the bullet-riddled table, slipping his gun back under his jacket. He scanned for threats, then immediately hurried toward the bar. Sophia! The raw edge in his voice made her heart twist. I'm okay, she managed, though she wasn't entirely sure. He came around to her side, stepping carefully over broken glass and debris. Are you hurt? His hands lightly gripped her shoulders, eyes searching her body for injury. She shook her head, voice trembling. I don't think so. She winced, feeling a sting in her forearm. A shallow cut from a flying shard of glass was oozing blood. Only then did the pain register through the adrenaline. Mateo followed her glance and gently took her arm, inspecting the wound. A muscle in his jaw ticked at the sight of blood. He pulled a pristine handkerchief from his pocket and pressed it to the cut firmly. "It's not deep," he murmured, his voice strained with a mix of anger and concern. "We'll get it taken care of." In the kitchen doorway, the staff huddled, eyes wide with shock. Marissa, the head waitress, was dialing the police with shaking fingers. Andres peeked out, face pale. Once they saw the shooting had stopped, a few ventured into the dining area to survey the damage. One look at Mateo and his guard, and Marissa's expression shifted from panic to fury. "You," she spat, pointing at Mateo with the nerve of someone who didn't realize the danger. "You brought this violence here." Mateo's guard stepped forward with a scowl, but Mateo lifted a hand to hold him back. A shadow of regret crossed Mateo's face as he faced Marissa. "Me dispies," he said quietly. "I'm sorry. Please tend to your people. We will cover the damages." Marissa looked ready to unleash more, but the sight of his gun at his hip silenced her. She instead turned to comfort a trembling server. Luca jogged back inside, chest heaving from the aborted chase. "He got away, boss," he said bitterly. "But it was Ricardo's man for sure. I recognized him." Mateo's eyes flashed with lethal intent. "Of course," he muttered. "The coward sends lackeys." Sirens wailed in the distance now. The police, responding to reports of gunfire. Mateo's expression hardened further. He shifted back to Sofia, who stood clutching the bloodied handkerchief to her arm, trying to steady her breathing. His voice dropped to a gentle whisper, at odds with the storm in his eyes. "Sofia, the police will be here soon. But I need to get you out of here subito, right away." She stared at him, still processing. The police. Normally, she'd welcome them after something like this. But Mateo was a wanted man, or at least someone they'd be very interested in. If she stayed, she'd be pulled into hours of statements, possibly danger if she mentioned his name, and there was the attacker still out there. Her head spun. I should give a statement. There's no time," he urged, an unusual plea in his tone. "Trust me, staying will only put you in more danger. Ricardo might have more men nearby." He gently guided her toward the side door, away from the front where curious neighbors were beginning to gather outside. Sofia's feet moved on autopilot as she tried to process who Ricardo was. Likely his enemy. Behind them, Luca and the other guard moved to cover their exit. They seemed to have done this drill before, clearing a path. Sofia balked for a second, looking back at her coworkers. "I can't just leave. They'll be all right. We'll make sure the restaurant is compensated." Mateo's hand was firm at the small of her back, propelling her into the alley just as the first police car's lights strobed red and blue at the end of the block. "Please, Sofia, I need you safe." The night air hit her like a slap, bringing clarity. If she stayed, the police and possibly more gunmen. If she left with Mateo, who was to say she'd be safer? Yet, as she looked up into his face, those fierce eyes now softened with genuine worry for her. A strange calm settled over her panic. He had protected her. She had seen him deliberately draw fire away from where she hid. This dangerous man was now her best chance at safety. "Okay," she breathed, and that was all he needed. In one swift motion, Mateo shrugged off his suit jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders, concealing her waitress uniform and the bloodstains. He guided her briskly down the alley where only minutes ago she'd walked home peacefully. Now it was a harrowing path toward an uncertain fate. They reached an SUV tucked behind the building. Another of Mateo's men leapt out from the driver's seat as they approached, holding the door open. Mateo helped Sofia into the back seat, climbing in beside her, while Luca took the front. The door barely shut when the vehicle roared to life and sped away, just as two police officers cautiously entered the alley from the other end, guns drawn. Sofia caught a glimpse of flashlights sweeping the shadows where they'd stood seconds before. Her stomach knotted at how close that was. The SUV merged into city traffic, obeying speed limits now to avoid drawing attention, but efficiently putting distance between them and the scene. Sofia sat back, the leather seats cold against her legs. Her whole body began to shake as the adrenaline faded, leaving shock in its wake. Mateo noticed immediately. Without a word, he reached over and gently took her hand, the one not pressed to her wound. His warmth seeped into her trembling fingers. She didn't pull away. She couldn't. In that moment, it was the only thing mooring her to reality. "You're safe now," he said softly, as if speaking to a spooked animal. "I promise." Sofia nodded mutely. Safe. with a Mafia boss on the run from the police and his enemies. The absurdity almost made her laugh hysterically. But she held it together, focusing on his hand around hers, the quiet strength it conveyed. After a few blocks, Mateo spoke again, this time to Luca in the front. "Any tale?" Luca glanced at the side mirror, then shook his head. "Nothing. I think we lost them in the confusion, and I doubt the cops got a good look at the plate." Mateo grunted in acknowledgement. He then turned his attention fully to Sophia. In the dim glow from the dash, his face was taut with concern. "We're going to my home. It's secure. I'll have a doctor meet us there to look at your arm, and to be safe, check you for shock." Sophia found her voice at last, croaking. "Your home? But my family will wonder where I am." She trailed off, realizing with a pang that indeed her mother and grandmother would panic if she didn't come home at all tonight. She kept her phone in her apron. No, she had it. Luca returned it last night. It was in her purse. As if reading her thoughts, Mateo reached inside the jacket he'd cloaked around her and found the outline of her phone in the pocket. He handed it to her. "You can call them on the way. Tell them you're safe," he said gently. "Maybe say you're with a friend." His lips quirked at the last word, aware of how insufficient it was to describe this situation. But Sophia appreciated the gesture. He was giving her an out to reassure her family without revealing too much. She unlocked the phone with unsteady fingers. It was past midnight now. Her mother would be asleep, but her grandmother had a habit of waking in the middle of the night and checking on Sophia if she wasn't home yet. She made a quick decision to call her mother's cell, which would be on silent at this hour, allowing her to leave a voicemail. It picked up after 2 rings, going to message. Voice trembling but trying to sound calm, Sophia said, "Mama, it's me. Something happened at work. There was a incident, but I'm okay. I'm with a friend for the night because the police need statements and stuff. I'll come home tomorrow morning. Don't worry, please. I'm safe. I love you." She hung up, hoping that would suffice until she could explain in person. Guilt gnawed at her. She hated lying, or at least hiding the full truth. But how could she possibly explain this? The SUV turned down a private drive, passing through a tall wrought iron gate that opened at Luca's remote signal. Sophia peered out at the sudden change of scenery. The city lights gave way to a long driveway lined with manicured hedges and trees. At the end loomed an elegant 3-story mansion, its facade lit by strategic lights that glowed warmly against stone walls. It was beautiful and imposing, an oasis of wealth and privacy tucked discreetly in a wealthy enclave she never realized existed so close to downtown. The tires crunched on gravel as they pulled up to the house. 2 more men appeared at the entrance as the vehicle came to a stop. Guards, obviously armed, who relaxed once they recognized the car. Mateo stepped out first, then reached to help Sophia. Her legs were unsteady, both from shock and from entering this grand estate like a fever dream. She must have looked pale because Mateo swept an arm around her waist to support her. She stiffened slightly at the intimate gesture, but it did make her feel steadier. Inside, the mansion was even more impressive. They entered a spacious foyer with marble floors and a sweeping staircase. A chandelier cast a soft glow over polished wood and tasteful artwork. It was the kind of home one only saw in magazines, yet it was eerily quiet, like a gallery after hours. No sooner had they entered than a man in a white dress shirt hurried towards them carrying a medical bag. A doctor, or at least someone who looked the part. "Dottore," Mateo addressed him. "Grazie for coming so quickly." The graying man nodded, concern etched on his face as he looked between Mateo and Sophia. "Always, Mateo. I came as soon as I heard. Who is injured?" "Signorina Romano has a cut on her arm. Possibly some shock. See to her first," Mateo said. Sophia opened her mouth to protest. Mateo had a streak of blood on his temple and a small tear in his sleeve. She wasn't the only one who needed attention. "I'm fine, it's just a scratch," she insisted, voice still shaky. "He should look at you." But Mateo gently guided her to sit on a velvet-upholstered bench in the foyer. "I'm all right. Just a graze." Only when she was seated did he remove his arm from around her. He bent closer, meeting her eyes. "Let the doctor check you, per favore." His gentle plea made her relent. The doctor introduced himself as Dr. Moretti with a reassuring smile and crouched beside her to tend her arm. As he carefully peeled away the makeshift handkerchief bandage, Sophia hissing slightly at the sting, Mateo barked low instructions to Luca and the other men. Words like security, patrol the grounds, and find that bastardo Ricardo carried to her ears. Dr. Moretti cleaned the wound with antiseptic from his kit. Sophia winced, but her eyes followed Mateo as he strode a few paces off, phone to his ear, speaking in rapid Italian too low to catch. He was a whirlwind of control and anger barely leashed. Even as the doctor applied a small bandage to her arm, she barely felt it, too focused on the man who had swept her into his storm. Soon the doctor was done with her. "Just a shallow cut," he said kindly. "No stitches needed. How do you feel otherwise, dear? Any dizziness, nausea?" I'm all right," Sophia lied unconvincingly. Her hand still trembled in her lap. Dr. Moretti patted her hand. "Shock is normal after such an ordeal. I'll make you some chamomile tea to help calm your nerves. How about that?" She nodded appreciatively. "Thank you, doctor." He gave her a fatherly nod and rose. As he passed Mateo, he clapped the younger man on the shoulder and murmured, "Sit down before you fall down, Figlio. Let me see that graze." Mateo ended his call and reluctantly allowed the doctor to examine him. It seemed the bullet had grazed the side of his head, just enough to bleed but not serious. Sophia realized with a start that if she hadn't seen the attacker, or if Mateo had moved a second slower. Her stomach lurched at the thought. He could have been killed. She found herself rising and stepping closer as the doctor cleaned the wound on Mateo's temple. Mateo sat on the bench now, and his eyes flicked to her hovering form. "All okay?" he asked softly, even as the antiseptic made him flinch slightly. Sophia nodded, wrapping her arms around herself. "Just worried about you." The admission slipped out before she could reconsider. It felt natural after what they'd just survived together. The doctor raised an eyebrow and gave a faint, knowing smile as he placed a small bandage on Mateo's head. "There. You'll live, Don DeLuca, hard-headed as you are." With that gentle ribbing, Dr. Moretti excused himself to prepare that tea, leaving them momentarily alone under the soft chandelier light. They regarded each other in charged silence. The events of the night loomed between them, terrifying and bonding them in an unspoken way. Finally, Mateo stood, rolling his shoulder as if testing for any other pains, and faced her fully. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, the words heavy. "This is my fault." Sophia opened her mouth to protest, but he continued, voice rough with guilt. "I never should have come back to see you tonight. I put you in danger. If anything happened to you," he exhaled sharply, his composure cracking just a fraction, "I was a selfish fool." Sophia was shaken by the raw emotion in his tone. She hesitated, then reached out to lightly touch his forearm. "Mateo, you couldn't have known. That man, he would have attacked wherever you were, right? It's not because of me." Mateo's hand drifted to cover hers in gratitude for her absolution, but his eyes remained stormy. "Perhaps. Ricardo has been after me for months. Still, bringing violence into your workplace. Your life." He shook his head. "It's unforgivable." Sophia's own temper sparked at his self-reproach. "Unforgivable is leaving me there to possibly be shot or caught in the crossfire. But you didn't. You protected me." Her voice trembled slightly, recalling how he'd drawn gunfire away from the bar where she hid. "You saved all of us, I think. If you hadn't been prepared—" He gave a humorless half-smile. "Prepared to make a bloody mess of a family restaurant? I doubt your co-workers see it that way." Sophia looked down. Marissa's accusation still rang in her ears. It had been chaotic, but indeed Mateo's presence brought danger, and now here she was, plucked out of her normal world and deposited into his. She gently freed her hand and stepped back, suddenly aware that they were standing very close. His jacket still hung over her shoulders, enveloping her in his scent. A mix of clean soap, a touch of cologne, and gunpowder residue. The adrenaline was ebbing, and with it came a swirl of conflicting feelings. Relief, fear, gratitude, and an undercurrent of something more intimate. I don't know what happens now," she admitted quietly. "Am I supposed to stay here? Will it be safe to go home tomorrow?" Mateo's expression shifted to one of resolve. "For tonight, you'll stay here. There are plenty of guest rooms. My men are guarding the perimeter. No one will harm you under my roof." He paused, considering his next words carefully. "As for tomorrow, we'll assess the situation. Ricardo knows someone was with me when his thug attacked. He might target you whether or not he knows your name, just to hurt me." Sophia's blood ran cold. She hadn't even thought of that. But why would he? "I'm nobody to him." "To you," she added hastily. Mateo's eyes caught hers, fierce and unwavering. "You are not nobody, Sophia. Not to me." The quiet conviction in his statement stole her breath. "He'll use any perceived weakness of mine. And you, unfortunately, just became a target by association." Her knees felt weak again, so she sank onto the bench. This was too much for one night. She rubbed her temples. "This is crazy," she murmured. "I'm just a waitress. I can't be involved in a mafia war. My family, if anything happened to them." Her voice broke. At that, Mateo knelt down in front of her, taking both her hands in his. The gesture was startlingly intimate and earnest. "Nothing will happen to them," he swore, his tone firm as iron. "I will assign guards discreetly to watch your home, your family. Ricardo wouldn't dare go near them." There was an edge in his voice as he said the name, a promise of retribution that made Sophia's skin prickle. She searched his eyes. "Why? Why would you do all this for me?" He looked almost hurt that she had to ask. "Because you saved my life tonight as much as I saved yours. If you hadn't shouted when you did, that first bullet might have found its mark." He touched the bandage on his temple. "I owe you a debt of life, Kara. In my world, that is not repaid lightly." Kara. The word meant dear. Sophia's heart flipped hearing it from his lips. "And," he continued softer, "because I find that the thought of anything happening to you is unacceptable to me." There was a vulnerability in his confession that made her chest tighten. Before Sophia could respond, Dr. Moretti returned, carrying a tray with a porcelain teapot and cup. He cleared his throat gently at the sight of the Mafia boss kneeling at the feet of this young woman, their hands clasped. "I brought the tea," he announced quietly. They separated, Sophia flushing and Mateo rising smoothly to his feet, all business again. The doctor poured a cup and handed it to Sophia. The fragrant scent of chamomile and lemon balm wafted up, soothing. "Thank you," she said, her voice steadier as she accepted the cup. She realized just how thirsty and drained she was. Blowing gently, she sipped the hot tea, letting its warmth spread through her. "I'll leave a mild sedative with the staff should you need help sleeping," Dr. Moretti said, gathering his bag. "Mateo, you know the drill. No strenuous activity or alcohol tonight. That graze will heal fine. Keep the bandage dry." Mateo nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Dottore. Send my regards to your wife for dragging you out of bed for me." The older man chuckled. "She's long used to it. Take care." He gave Sophia a kind smile. "Rest, dear. You'll feel better in the morning." With that, the doctor left, and one of the estate staff escorted him out. Mateo turned back to Sophia. She had finished half the tea, and some color returned to her cheeks. The fact that he had estate staff, likely a housekeeper or butler, barely registered before. "I imagine you'd like to clean up," Mateo said gently. He gestured to her clothes, which were smudged with dust and speckled with blood from her cut. A bruise was forming on her elbow where she'd hit the floor. "I can have someone bring you fresh clothes, and I'll show you to a room where you can rest." Sophia realized the night's grime and chaos clung to her like a second skin. A hot shower sounded heavenly, and sleep, if it would come, maybe even better. But a sudden wave of apprehension hit her at the idea of being alone in a strange room in this mansion. The adrenaline crash left her feeling vulnerable. "Could you stay? At least until I fall asleep?" she asked before she could second guess. Immediately she was mortified by how needy that sounded. But Mateo didn't blink. "If that's what you want, I'll stay nearby." He reached out as if to touch her shoulder, then stopped, not wanting to presume. "I'll be right down the hall. You have my word nothing will happen here. This home is a fortress, but I understand. After what happened, being alone is hard." She gave a shaky nod, appreciating his understanding. "Thank you." He offered his arm in a surprisingly old-fashioned manner to help her up. She took it, and together they ascended the grand staircase. Sophia marveled distractedly at the art on the walls, old oil paintings of Italian countryside scenes, and the plush feel of the carpet under her worn work flats. He led her to a spacious guest room on the second floor. It was elegantly furnished in calming tones of cream and gold, with a large 4-poster bed and an adjoining bathroom. It smelled faintly of lavender. On the bed, as if by magic, lay neatly folded clothes, a pair of drawstring sleep pants and a soft cotton t-shirt, likely belonging to a woman on staff, or perhaps kept for guests. Sophia looked to Mateo questioningly. He gave a small smile. "I had someone bring a few things for you. They should fit well enough for tonight." She clutched the lapels of his jacket around her, feeling oddly shy now that they were away from the chaos. "Thank you. For everything. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." He shook his head, stepping back toward the door to give her space. "You owe me nothing, Sophia. It's I who am making amends to you." His gaze lingered, as if reluctant to leave her even for a moment. "Try to rest. We'll talk more in the morning when things are clearer." She nodded. "Good night, Mateo." His name on her lips made something soften in his expression. "Buonanotte, Sophia," he replied gently. He left the door slightly ajar as he departed, perhaps to reassure her that he was close. Sophia set the tea down on the bedside table and released a long, quivering breath. What a difference a day made. 24 hours ago, she was a stranger to this man, quietly serving pasta. Now she was in his home, wearing his jacket, her life inexplicably tangled with his. Sophia carefully peeled off the stained work uniform and stepped into the attached bathroom. She caught a glance of herself in the mirror, wide-eyed and exhausted. A small cut on her forehead she hadn't even noticed before. She looked like someone else, someone frightened and uncertain. She tore her gaze away and turned on the shower. Hot water drummed on her skin, washing away the dirt and the lingering smell of smoke. She stood under the spray longer than necessary, letting silent tears mix with the water as the shock and stress finally found release. Sophia cried for a few minutes, mourning the simple life that had been upended and releasing the sheer terror she'd held at bay. When her tears subsided, she finished washing and stepped out, drying off with a plush towel. She slipped on the clean t-shirt and pants, which were a bit large but soft and comforting. As she combed out her damp hair, she took a deep breath. She could do this. Just get through tonight. Tomorrow, maybe this dangerous whirlwind would spit her back out to normalcy. Climbing into the large bed, she realized just how bone-deep weary she was. The mattress was like a cloud. Still, sleep didn't come easily. Every time she closed her eyes, the crack of gunfire replayed in her head. She could almost smell the gunpowder again, see Mateo's figure diving to protect others, the flash of muzzle fire. In the dim lamplight she'd left on, her gaze fell on the door, slightly ajar. True to his word, she heard a presence outside. Mateo had stationed himself, or a guard there. She decided she might feel safer if it really was him. Gathering her resolve, Sophia slipped out of bed and padded to the door. She opened it fully to find Mateo sitting on a chair in the hallway just a few steps away, a book in hand. He looked up, surprised. "Is everything all right?" he asked, immediately alert. Sophia flushed, suddenly feeling foolish. I just wanted to make sure it was you out here and not, I don't know, a stranger." Mateo set the book aside and stood. "It's just me. I wanted to give you privacy but remain close if you needed anything." She bit her lip. The strong, fierce protector looked a bit out of place lingering in a hallway past midnight. "You don't have to stay up keeping watch like this. You should rest too." He gave a slight shrug. "I've gone without sleep on many nights. I'm all right." Sophia hesitated, then asked quietly, "Will you sit with me? Just for a little while. I think I'd sleep better." Mateo's eyes widened a fraction, but he nodded without hesitation. "If that's what you want." She stepped back to let him into the room. He glanced around respectfully, then followed her to the sitting area by the window where 2 armchairs faced each other. For a few moments they sat in silence, the only sound the soft ticking of a clock on the mantel. Sophia looked at Mateo, truly looked, taking in the events that had brought them here. The bandage on his temple, a faint bruise on his cheekbone that she hadn't noticed earlier, likely from diving to the ground. His shirt, now untucked and a bit wrinkled, carried a few specks of blood, her blood, from where he'd held her arm. He looked human and a bit weary, yet still so formidable. She realized she was staring when he met her gaze and offered a gentle, lopsided smile. "Feeling better?" She nodded. "Much, thank you. I'm sorry I keep pulling you away from what you need to do." You probably have 100 fires to put out after that attack, and here I am asking you to babysit me." He frowned slightly and leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. "Sophia, there is nowhere I'd rather be at this moment than here, making sure you're all right. The other matters can wait or be handled by my men." His words wrapped around her heart, squeezing it gently. "You mean that, don't you?" she murmured almost to herself. "Every word," he replied, voice low. Sophia's cheeks warmed again. She suddenly felt an urge to lighten the heavy atmosphere. She eyed the book he'd left on the chair in the hall. "What were you reading?" Mateo followed her glance. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked almost shy. "Oh, just a novel. I didn't think I'd actually be reading, but sometimes it helps pass the time." She was intrigued. "A novel? Which one?" He cleared his throat, and if she wasn't mistaken, a hint of color touched his cheeks. "Dostoevsky, Crime and Punishment." He gave a half smile. "Seemed appropriate, I suppose." Sophia raised her brows in surprise. It wasn't the answer she expected. She found herself smiling. "Light bedtime reading, He chuckled, a deep, soft sound that eased some of the residual tension inside her. "Perhaps not. But it keeps my mind sharp." There was something endearing about a Mafia boss reading classic literature in the middle of the night. It reminded her that there were depths to this man she'd only glimpsed, a cultured side, an introspective side. "Do you often have time to read?" she asked softly, genuinely curious. Mateo shrugged one shoulder. "Not as much as I'd like. But my mother, she was a professor of literature. She instilled in me a love for books when I was young. It's one of the few parts of that old life I've held on to." Sophia was charmed by this revelation. "Your mother must be proud that you still read, then." A shadow flickered across his face. "I'm not sure proud is a word I'd associate with how my mother might feel about my life." He looked away. "We don't speak often. She knows some of what I do, and while she loves me, it causes her pain." Sophia instantly regretted the turn of topic. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. He shook his head. "Not your fault, just the way things are." She realized in that moment that beneath the confident, commanding facade, Mateo carried burdens that ran deep. It made her ache for him in a way that was both strange and profound, given how briefly she'd known him. Impulsively, she reached across the small distance and placed her hand over his where it rested on the arm of his chair. "For what it's worth, I think there's more to you than what causes her pain." He looked down at her hand, then back up, his hazel eyes searching hers. "You barely know me," he said. But there was no dismissal in his tone, only a quiet longing for that to be true. "Then show me," she whispered, unsure where the bravery came from. "Let me see who you are, Mateo." The air between them grew charged. For a suspended moment, it seemed he might close that small distance. Perhaps take her in his arms. Sophia's heart hammered at the thought. Part of her was still raw and afraid from the night's events, but another part felt undeniably drawn to this complex man who had walked into her life so unexpectedly. But Mateo, ever the gentleman, simply turned his hand under hers and gave it a gentle squeeze. "In time," he said softly. "You need rest now. We both do." He was right, though a tiny part of her felt disappointment. Still, his warm grasp was comforting. She realized her eyes were growing heavy now that the tea and exhaustion were catching up. "I think I can sleep now," she murmured. Mateo released her hand and stood. "I'll be right outside if you need anything." Sophia mustered a faint smile. "Thank you for staying with me." He inclined his head, then moved to the door. "Buonanotte, Sophia," he said again softly. "Buonanotte, Mateo," she replied. He left, pulling the door to but not shutting it fully. Sophia slipped back into the luxurious bed, the sheets cool against her skin. This time, when she closed her eyes, the fear didn't immediately claw at her. She let the memory of Mateo's gentle voice and strong hands drive away the darker images. In a matter of minutes, she drifted into a deep, dreamless sleep, knowing he stood guard in the shadows. Later that morning, Luca appeared at the doorway, phone in hand and urgency on his face. "Boss, scusa," he said. "We caught one of Ricardo's men lurking near the property." Mateo's demeanor hardened instantly. He stood from the chair he'd dozed in outside Sophia's room. "Keep him in the cellar. I'll be right there. He glanced at Sophia, apology in his eyes. She had woken to the commotion and now stepped out into the hall, pulling a robe around the borrowed sleep clothes. I need to handle this, he told her gently. Wait here, Kara. But Sophia's anxiety spiked. Ricardo's man here. That meant danger was still very real. Be careful, she pleaded. He gave her hand a reassuring squeeze and followed Luca down the corridor. Minutes ticked by. Unable to sit idle, Sophia crept toward the cellar stairs. Halfway down, she heard raised voices and a muffled cry of pain. Her heart lurched. Peering around the corner, she glimpsed Mateo gripping a bruised, bloodied thug by the collar. Who else is out there? Mateo growled. The man spat blood, refusing to answer. Mateo slammed him against the wall, anger rolling off him in palpable waves. Sophia gasped softly. She had never seen him so terrifying. Luca noticed her shadow on the stairs and quickly stepped over. Miss, you shouldn't be here, he whispered, guiding her back up gently before Mateo could spot her. Shaken, Sophia retreated to the hall. A few minutes later, Mateo emerged, rolling down his sleeves, knuckles raw. His eyes widened, seeing her pale face. Sophia! She stepped back unconsciously. What did you do to him? Mateo exhaled, running a hand through his hair. I got the information we needed. Ricardo is planning another attack soon. I have to stop him first. His voice was steely, but Sophia only saw the violence etched on his knuckles. A chill rippled through her. I don't recognize you like this, she said quietly. All this talk of killing and revenge. It scares me, Mateo. He reached for her. Everything I do is to protect us, to end this threat. Tears brimmed in her eyes. By becoming just as ruthless? I can't, Mateo. I can't watch you turn into someone unrecognizable. She took a shaky breath. I need to go home. I need to see my family. I can't stay here right now. Anguish flashed over his face. Please, Sophia, it isn't safe yet. My mother and Nonna must be worried sick. I have to see them, she insisted, voice breaking. I'll take the risk. I can't be locked away here while all this happens. Mateo looked torn, the fierce protector in him warring with his respect for her wishes. At length he nodded grimly. All right, I'll have Luca drive you home. But I'm sending extra men to watch the neighborhood. Sophia wanted to protest further protection, but stopped herself. She managed a small nod. Thank you. He gently cupped her face. I'm sorry, he whispered. I never wanted to frighten you. Her heart ached at his pained expression. I just need a little time, Mateo, to feel normal with my family. He pressed a tender kiss to her forehead. I understand. Call me if you need anything. I'll come in a heartbeat. With that, arrangements were made. Within the hour, Luca was driving Sophia back to her neighborhood in a discreet sedan. 2 other cars with Mateo's men followed at a distance. As they pulled up to her modest apartment building, dusk was settling. Sophia's chest tightened with emotion, seeing the lights on in the windows. Her mother was likely cooking dinner, unaware of the turmoil her daughter had been through. I'll wait outside, miss, Luca said gently as he parked. Take your time. She thanked him and hurried up the front steps. Using the spare key hidden in a potted plant, she let herself in. Sophia! Her mother Maria gasped in relief from the kitchen doorway. In seconds, Maria and Nonna were embracing her tightly. We were so worried. You said not to worry, but you were gone all night. I'm sorry, Mama, Sophia murmured into her shoulder, tears of guilt and happiness mingling. There was an incident at work, but I'm all right, truly. Nonna Carlotta held her face between work-worn hands, searching her eyes. Cara Mia, you look exhausted. And what is this bruise? She thumbed Sophia's cheek where a faint mark remained from the prior chaos. Sophia mustered a reassuring smile. It's nothing. I missed you both so much. She spent the next hour in the warmth of their little home, deflecting detailed questions with half-truths. Yes, she had been safe with a friend from work after a scary incident. No, she wasn't hurt badly. She just needed to be home tonight. All the while, outside on the street, Sophia occasionally glimpsed a shadow of Luca or another guard keeping watch. It should have comforted her, but instead, she felt a nagging unease. If Ricardo was desperate, would even guards deter him? Late that night, after her mother and grandmother had gone to bed, Sophia remained in the darkened living room, restless. She peered through a crack in the curtains. One of Mateo's men stood under a street lamp across the way, ever vigilant. With a sigh, she eased onto the couch. The silence of her home was both a balm and a source of anxiety. She yearned for Mateo, wondering if he was safe, but also dreaded what might come next in this deadly game with Ricardo. Her eyelids grew heavy past midnight. Just as she began to drift into a light sleep, a sudden thud jolted her awake. She sat up, heart pounding. The sound had come from the back door, like something or someone bumping it. Sofia's blood ran cold. She hurried down the hall and quietly knocked on her grandmother's bedroom door, where her mother and Nonna slept. Maria cracked it open, eyes bleary. Sofia pressed a finger to her lips, whispering, "Stay with Nonna and lock the door. Now." Fear flared in her mother's eyes at Sofia's tone. But Maria nodded, pulling her sleepy mother further inside and clicking the lock. Another noise, footsteps on the porch. Sofia's mind raced. Luca was supposed to be outside. Where was he? She grabbed the first thing at hand, a heavy ceramic vase from a side table, and positioned herself behind the living room door. The house was dim, only the faint glow of a street lamp through the window. A shattering crash of wood. 2 dark figures kicked in the kitchen door, splintering it off its frame. Sofia bit back a scream, gripping the vase until her knuckles ached. The intruders' voices hissed low in Italian. "Sbrigati, quick!" They moved through the kitchen into the short hallway. As one passed the living room entry, Sofia mustered every ounce of courage and swung the vase with all her might at his head. It connected with a sickening thud. The man crumpled to the floor, unconscious or worse. Before she could react, a second assailant lunged from behind, seizing her arm. The vase fell, smashing on the ground. Sofia fought like a wildcat, kicking and writhing. "Luca!" she screamed, hoping the guard was nearby. The thug clamped a hand over her mouth and dragged her toward the open doorway. Outside, the silhouette of a van loomed in the driveway. Panic gave her strength. She sank her teeth into the man's palm. He yelped and loosened his grip. Suddenly, a gun's barrel pressed to her temple. "Basta!" a cold voice warned. "One more sound and I'll shoot." Sofia froze, breaths coming in frantic pants. In the street, she saw Luca's figure lying motionless near the curb, perhaps struck from behind by a lookout. Oh, God. With ruthless efficiency, the thug shoved Sofia into the back of the van, binding her wrists with zip ties and slapping duct tape over her mouth. Her screams died into muffled whimpers. The van door slid shut, plunging her into darkness. As the engine roared to life, tears streamed down her face. She realized with dread whose hand she was in. Ricardo had her. And Mateo, he would come. She prayed he would come, after what felt like an eternity, though it was only perhaps 20 minutes. The van ground to a halt. Sofia had been tossed around on the metal floor with each turn, the rough ride bruising her knees and shoulders. Now, as the door slid open, she squinted against harsh floodlights. A strong hand grabbed her bound arms and yanked her out. The night air was cool and smelled of salt and oil. They must be near the docks, or an industrial area. In front of her loomed a dilapidated warehouse. The thug half-dragged, half-carried her inside the building. Sofia's heart hammered. Her eyes darted frantically, seeking any sign of help, but saw only the cavernous, empty interior lit by a single dangling work lamp. Footsteps echoed. From the shadows, a tall, lean figure emerged, applauding slowly. Ricardo. He wore a dark coat, and his face split into a triumphant grin as he approached. "Bravo," he drawled to his underling, waving a pistol casually. Mateo's little sweetheart, delivered as promised. The henchman holding Sofia shoved her forward. She stumbled, nearly falling to her knees. Ricardo reached out and snatched the tape from her mouth with a cruel yank. She gasped, drawing in dusty air. He tilted her chin up with the gun's barrel. "Buonasera, signorina," he purred. "We finally meet. You caused me quite some trouble, you know." Sofia glared despite the tears pricking her eyes. "Let me go," she demanded hoarsely. Ricardo chuckled. "Afraid not. You're the bait, my dear. Mateo will come for you, and when he does..." Bang! He pressed the gun to her temple, making her flinch. She mustered courage, her voice trembling with rage. "He'll kill you," she spat. "You won't get away with this." "Oh, feisty." Ricardo sneered. "Perhaps I see what Mateo likes about you." He eyed her up and down, making her skin crawl. "Once I finish him, maybe I'll keep you for myself. A pretty trophy." Sophia's stomach churned with disgust. Summoning all her defiance, she abruptly leaned forward and spit at him, the glob of saliva striking his cheek. Ricardo's eyes widened in disbelief. Slowly, his expression twisted into fury. He wiped his cheek with a grimace. "Bruta putana," he snarled. The back of his hand whipped across her face with vicious force. Pain exploded in her cheek, and she crashed to the concrete floor, ears ringing. Before she could gather herself, the thug yanked her up and flung her onto a rickety chair. "Tie her," Ricardo ordered coldly. Rough hands lashed more zip ties around her wrists and ankles, binding her painfully to the chair. Sophia's cheek throbbed. She tasted blood in her mouth, but she refused to let Ricardo see her cry. He crouched in front of her, grabbing a fistful of her hair and forcing her head back. "When Mateo arrives, and he will very soon, thanks to your loyal guard alerting him, you're going to watch him die. Understand?" Sophia's heart surged. Luca must have regained consciousness and called Mateo. Hope and dread warred within her. Ricardo misread her flicker of relief as defiance. He shook her head by the hair. "You think he'll save you? He's walking into a trap. One false move, and my man there will put a bullet in your skull." He pointed the gun toward his henchman, now lurking off to the side with a rifle trained on Sophia. Sophia tried to steady her breathing. She had to think. The odds were terrible. A gun on her, another on Mateo when he arrived. But Mateo had Luca and others, perhaps. She tested her bonds subtly. The zip tie on her left wrist was already sticky with her blood from her earlier escape at home. It cut into her skin, but perhaps she began to twist her small hand, wincing as the plastic rubbed raw flesh. Minutes ticked by. Ricardo grew impatient, pacing. Sophia's ears strained for any sound of approach. Finally there, a scuff of footsteps outside. Ricardo grinned wolfishly and retreated behind a stack of crates about 15 feet away, taking cover, but keeping his gun aimed at Sophia. He gestured for his thug to do the same on the opposite flank. "Showtime," he whispered. The warehouse door creaked open. Sophia's heart leapt as she saw Mateo slip inside, flanked by Luca and another of his men. They moved cautiously, guns raised, sweeping the room. Sophia wanted to cry out a warning, but Ricardo stepped from hiding and pressed his pistol to her head from behind. Ah, he called out. "Drop them, gentlemen, or the girl dies now." Mateo's eyes locked on Sophia and went wide with terror and relief. "Sophia," he breathed. Seeing her bruised face and bound to the chair, a murderous rage contorted his features. But with a gun to her temple, he had no choice. He motioned for Luca and the other man to lower their weapons. Slowly, Mateo bent and laid his handgun on the ground, raising his hands. "Ricardo," he said, voice raw with hatred. "This is between you and me. Let her go." Ricardo emerged fully now, keeping Sophia as a human shield in front of him as he moved closer. "Indeed it is between us," he purred. "But I've learned your weakness, DeLuca. You care for this girl. So much that you walked right into my hands." Mateo took a step forward, desperation in every line of his body. "You have me. Do what you want with me, but leave her out of it." Sophia's throat tightened. "No, Mateo, don't," she cried, but Ricardo yanked her hair, silencing her with a yelp of pain. "Quiet!" Ricardo hissed. His eyes gleamed as he savored the moment. Such chivalry. "Toss over any other weapons, all of you, now!" Luca and the other guard carefully slid a knife and secondary pistol across the floor. The henchman collected everything, covering them with his rifle. "Good," Ricardo said. He pushed Sophia's chair forward a few feet, so she was directly between him and Mateo. "On your knees, old friend." Mateo complied, kneeling just a couple yards in front of Sophia. She could see his face clearly now. There were tears in his eyes as he looked at her. "I'm sorry," he choked out, voice trembling. "Sophia, I'm so sorry I dragged you into this." Her heart shattered at the anguish in his words. "It's not your fault," she managed to say around the lump in her throat. "I love you, Mateo." Emotion flickered across his face. "I love you too," he whispered. "Oh, spare me," Ricardo cut in, disgusted. "This isn't a damned romance." He stepped to Sophia's side, gun aimed at Mateo's forehead now. "It's a tragedy. Say goodbye," Sophia's pulse thundered. Time seemed to slow as Ricardo's finger tightened on the trigger. "No, no, no!" She refused to let this happen. Summoning every ounce of will, Sophia yanked her left hand hard. The zip tie, slick with her blood, stretched enough. Her hand slipped free. In one motion, she threw herself sideways out of the chair, knocking into Ricardo's arm just as he fired. The gunshot cracked like thunder. The bullet skimmed past Mateo's shoulder, missing its mark by inches. Chaos erupted. Luca lunged from his knees, tackling the rifleman before he could react. They crashed to the floor, weapon clattering away. Mateo didn't hesitate. He surged up and dove at Ricardo. The two men tumbled to the concrete. Ricardo's pistol skidded across the floor out of reach. Sophia, dazed on the ground, saw Ricardo scramble for the gun. "Mateo!" she screamed, warning him. Mateo grabbed Ricardo's ankle, yanking him back. The crime boss roared in anger, swinging a wild kick that caught Mateo's jaw. Mateo grunted, but clung on, dragging Ricardo down. They grappled furiously, trading blows. Nearby, Luca subdued the other henchman with a swift blow to the head. "Go help the boss," he shouted to the second guard, who had recovered a fallen gun. Sophia frantically tore the remaining ties off her ankles, her freed hand slick with blood, making it easier. Ignoring the burning pain in her wrist and the searing graze of something on her upper arm, had a bullet grazed her? She barely registered it. She crawled toward the dropped pistol a few yards away. Mateo and Ricardo were both on their feet again. Ricardo had managed to draw a knife from his boot and slashed at Mateo's side. Mateo hissed as it cut into him. In retaliation, Mateo landed a heavy punch to Ricardo's face, sending him reeling. Blood ran from Ricardo's nose, but he charged like a mad bull, knocking Mateo into a stack of wooden pallets. The structure collapsed with a crash, pinning Mateo's leg. Ricardo raised his knife, eyes blazing with triumph. "Time to die, DeLuca!" Sophia's fingers closed on the cool handle of Ricardo's fallen pistol. Shaking, she raised it. The two men struggled mere yards away. She had to be sure not to hit Mateo. She waited, heart in her throat. There! Ricardo drew back for a fatal stab, exposing his side. Sophia pulled the trigger. The recoil jolted her arm. A red bloom spread on Ricardo's coat as the bullet struck his upper arm. He howled, the knife clattering from his grasp as his arm fell uselessly to his side. The crime boss stumbled, shock on his face. Mateo threw off the broken pallet and in one fluid motion snatched up the fallen knife. He pressed forward, slamming Ricardo against a pillar and holding the blade to his throat. Ricardo panted, blood from his nose and arm staining his expensive suit. Defeat and hatred warred in his eyes. "Go on," he hissed at Mateo. "Finish it. Be the killer I know you are." Breathing hard, Mateo tightened his grip on the knife. Rage contorted his face. Years of bad blood and loss fueled his desire to end Ricardo here and now. Sophia scrambled up, her limbs trembling, and rushed to his side. "Mateo," she said softly, laying a gentle, bloody hand on his arm. "It's over. He's beaten. You're not a murderer, not in cold blood." Mateo's jaw clenched, the blade at Ricardo's throat drawing a drop of blood. Ricardo sneered, but fear flickered in his eyes. "You have a choice," Sophia whispered, meeting Mateo's tortured gaze. "For us, for our future. Don't cross that line. He's not worth it." For a long moment, the world stood still. Then Mateo closed his eyes, exhaling a shuddering breath. Slowly, he lowered the knife. His hand fell to his side, and the blade clattered to the floor. Ricardo slumped in defeat, glaring venomously. Luca approached, gun trained on the man. "Boss, you all right?" Mateo nodded wearily, pulling Sophia into his arms as if to reassure himself she was truly there. She melted against him. "It ends here," Mateo said quietly. He glanced at Luca. "Call the police. Let them take out the trash." Ricardo swore and spat at the ground, but pain and loss sapped his fight. He knew he was finished in more ways than one. Sophia buried her face in Mateo's chest, shaking with delayed fear and relief. His arms tightened around her. "Shh, cara mia. I've got you," he murmured, kissing the top of her head. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance as Luca made the necessary calls. Mateo gently lifted Sophia's chin, eyes searching her face worriedly. "You're hurt," he said, thumb grazing the raw rope burn and cut on her arm. "I'm fine," she promised in a hoarse whisper. "Thanks to you." He gave a broken laugh, emotion shining in his eyes. "It was you. You saved me first." Sophia managed a smile through her tears. "Seems we make a good team." Mateo's expression turned tender. Cupping her cheeks, filthy and bruised as she was, he kissed her, deeply, reverently. Sophia threw her unbound arm around him, kissing him back with all the love and longing that had nearly been snatched away. Behind them, Luca cleared his throat, guiding the arriving police to a cursing Riccardo and the unconscious thug. But Mateo and Sofia were lost in each other. When they finally parted, Mateo rested his forehead against hers. In the flashing red-blue lights now filling the warehouse, he whispered, "Ti amo, Sofia." Tears of joy filled her eyes. "Ti amo, Mateo," she replied. They had faced death and darkness and emerged into the light of each other's love. Whatever came next, they would face it together. 2 years later, a warm Mediterranean breeze rustled through the olive trees as the late afternoon sun bathed the Sicilian countryside in gold. On the terrace of a cozy stone villa overlooking rolling hills and the distant sea, Sofia swayed gently with a drowsy infant in her arms, humming a soft Italian lullaby. Inside the open French doors, familiar voices drifted from the kitchen, her mother and Nonna cheerfully debating a recipe, and Mateo's deep laughter chiming in. The sound brought a contented smile to Sofia's face. Family. La familia è tutto. Family is everything. She looked down at baby Antonio, who had finally fallen asleep against her shoulder. He had Mateo's dark lashes and her own button nose. Gently, she brushed a curl from his cherubic face and placed a tender kiss on his forehead. Life had transformed so much in the past 2 years. Sometimes Sofia could hardly believe the path that led her here, starting with an ordinary night at a restaurant that turned into anything but ordinary. She and Mateo had walked through danger and darkness to build this shining new life. After Riccardo's arrest and conviction, helped by evidence anonymously provided to the authorities, Mateo had made good on his promise to change course. He quietly dismantled the most violent parts of his operations and turned many businesses legitimate. In time, the name De Luca became associated with charitable donations and community projects instead of fear. Not long after, he proposed to Sofia on a sunset beach in Sicily, tears of joy in his eyes as he vowed to love and protect her for the rest of his life. She didn't hesitate to say yes. They were married in a small church overlooking the sea, with her mother and Nonna standing beside her, and Mateo's mother flying in from Palermo to bless them both. Now they lived a peaceful life in the Sicilian countryside. With Mateo's support, Sofia had opened her own bakery cafe in the nearby town, a lifelong dream she never even realized she had until he helped her believe it was possible. Each morning, they worked side by side, kneading dough and brewing cappuccinos for the locals, who had quickly embraced the friendly young couple from abroad. Her grandmother and mother had moved to Sicily as well, delighted to trade the noisy city for a sunny village where Carlotta's health improved, and Maria found joy helping with the cafe and doting on her grandson. Sofia heard the screen door creak and turned to see Mateo stepping out onto the terrace. Dressed casually in rolled-up shirt sleeves and loafers, he looked every bit the devoted husband and father, though the glint of strength in his hazel eyes was unchanged. He came up behind Sofia and wrapped an arm around her waist, peering down at their sleeping son. "Everything all right, amore?" he murmured. "Perfect," Sofia whispered. She leaned back against him. "Just got him to sleep." Mateo smiled, pressing a kiss to Sofia's temple. "I was thinking, after dinner, we can walk down to the grove. The sunflowers are in bloom." Sofia tilted her head up to meet his gaze, her heart fluttering as it always did. "I'd love that." Golden evening light played across Mateo's face, highlighting the faint scar at his temple, the only outward reminder of that fateful night. Noticing her looking, he raised his brows in question. "I was just thinking how lucky I am," Sofia said softly. "If I hadn't spoken Italian that night, if you hadn't heard me," Mateo's eyes warmed, "I think fate would have brought us together one way or another. But hearing you speak my mother tongue, yes, that was the spark." He chuckled. "I did rather dramatically demand they bring you to me, did I not?" Sofia laughed quietly to avoid waking the baby. "You did. It was quite the first impression. And look at us now." Mateo gently traced a finger along Antonio's tiny back, a tender pride in his expression. He then cupped Sofia's cheek, his wedding band glinting in the sun. "Grazie, mia cara, for everything. You showed me what life could be, beyond all the shadows." Emotion swelled in Sofia's chest. She remembered the man she first met, the guarded Mafia boss, and compared him to the loving partner by her side. Both parts were dear to her, She covered his hand with hers. We found that new life together. Inside, Nonna's voice called, Sofia, Mateo, veni qui. Dinner is ready. They shared a smile. Mateo carefully took baby Antonio from her arms, cradling him against his chest. The little one stirred and opened sleepy eyes, then gave a tiny sigh and snuggled into his father's shoulder. Sofia's heart melted at the sight. Hand in hand, they went inside to join their family, the house filled with the aroma of ripe tomatoes, fresh bread, and the bright sound of laughter. In this simple, beautiful moment, Sofia knew she was exactly where she was meant to be, safe in the warmth of love and family, with the man who had changed her life when he heard her speak Italian on an otherwise ordinary night. And for Mateo, every day that began and ended with Sofia by his side was a gift, a proof that even a man with a dark past could find redemption and tenderness in the heart of the woman he loved. Whatever challenges the future might hold, they would face them together. Their journey, full of danger, passion, and hope, had led them here, to a happiness hard-won and deeply cherished. La vita è più dolce con te, Mateo had told her one quiet evening. Life is sweeter with you. Sofia smiled as they sat down to dinner, fingers intertwined with Mateo's beneath the table. Grazie a te, amore mio, she whispered, meeting his loving gaze. Thank you, my love. Life was indeed sweeter, together.